Hello, my name is Aubrey. Today I want to talk about all of my unfinished series. Those of you who know me here on the channel know that I am a notorious binge reader. I love waiting until a series is finished and then binging it all the way through. And even still, I have found myself in the middle of several series. I have quite a stack here. I believe I'm currently in the middle of 11 series, which I know is not that many. I've definitely seen a lot worse, but it feels like a lot for me, and some of these were surprising. I had to go deep into my Goodreads. To be honest, some of these I had completely forgotten about. Today I'm just going to be going through each of those series, discussing why I may have put it down in the first place and whether I plan to continue. Alright, so let's start with one that I started last year. It is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I was a little disappointed with it, to be honest. I was expecting this to be like a knockout 5 stars. My expectations were pretty high, probably too high. I don't want to say that it totally fell flat for me. There were parts that I enjoyed. There were characters that I enjoyed. There were just a few things that turned me off from it. One was the pacing, and two was the treatment of the female characters. I have heard that the next books in the series do get better, so I do want to continue. At least the original trilogy I do plan to finish. The next series I have is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I have read this first book now twice. Both times I meant to binge it, as I tend to do. The first time around, again, this was another case of just being disappointed. At the time that I read this, the very first time, I had literally never heard a single bad thing about it. Like, I had never heard one bad word said against this book. Every review I had seen had been a knockout 5-star. Like, this was some of my favorite and most trusted booktubers' favorite book ever, like just top of the list. My expectations going into this were like sky high, and I was put off by a few things. I think the biggest thing was the writing. I found the writing to be very subpar, really repetitive. I didn't really connect with the characters. I thought parts of it were really slow. I don't know. It was one of those instances where something is hyped up so much and then you finally sit down to read it and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm reading the same book that everybody else is talking about, you know? I'm sorry. Truly, I'm so sorry. And then the second time I read it, I was trying to just sort of like read it for what it was and not for what my expectations were. And I did enjoy it more upon reread, but I still didn't carry on with the rest of the books. I think I tried to sit down with the second book and I just couldn't get into it. This is a trilogy that I do still want to read one day. Like, I do want to have read Mistborn. I guess at this point I'm just hung up on the fact that I would now have to reread this book a third time in order to continue, because I know it's a series with a lot of little details and hints, and I know that I'll want all of that stuff really fresh in my brain when I carry on to books 2 and 3. One day I will get to it. I would love to read it this year. I feel like every year I say, okay, this is going to be the year that you read the Mistborn trilogy, and I just don't get around to it. Oh, I should have said, by the way, at the beginning of the video that these are all complete series. These are not like ongoing series. I don't tend to read a lot of ongoing series anyway, but to meet the requirements for this video, I wanted them all to be finished series. I have no excuse to not have finished them. I just haven't. Anyway, next on my list is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I read this the year that it came out in 2018, I believe, and you guys are gonna laugh at me, but the reason that I read it, even though I knew it was gonna be a long series, was because I really wanted to buy these beautiful UK hardcovers, because I just, like, these are stunning and I love them so much more than the US versions. But because I had read Mistborn and I hadn't really liked it, I sort of wouldn't allow myself to buy it unless I had read it and I knew that I liked it. I got it from the library and I read it and I did really enjoy it. I liked Skyward quite a lot. I just didn't continue on with it because it wasn't finished. I just haven't. Like, I haven't touched this series since then. So I've been waiting for that last book to come out, but as of November last year, the series is finished, so I no longer have any excuses. I would like to get back into Skyward at some point in the future. It's not a top priority, but I did really enjoy this book. Unfortunately, I've heard very mixed things about the rest of the series. I guess we'll see, but I do own them. Like, I have books 2, 3, and the bind up of the short stories or novellas or whatever. I have them waiting for me whenever I'm ready to pick the series back up again. Okay, next up is another series that I started last year, kind of at the tail end of the year. It is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Stephanie Garber. This is a DNF for me. I read the entire Caraval trilogy last year. I did not enjoy it, but I read it in order to get to this, which I thought was going to be better. I thought at the very least I was going to like it more, and I didn't. You can hear all about my thoughts on that in my worst books of 2023 video. I rant about these for a considerable amount of time. Yeah, I did not think these were good. I didn't. In the past, I would have pushed through. I would have just read book 3 to say that I had and to have another completed series under my belt, because I just really hate having unfinished series. But you know what? I'm not going to do that to myself. I know I won't like it, so why would I subject myself to that? This trilogy is a DNF for sure. It was not for me, and that's okay. Next, I have the Button Box trilogy by Stephen King. I read this all the way back in 2018, and at the time, I think I thought that it was just a standalone, which is why I picked it up. I can't remember too much about it, to be honest. It's about a girl named Gwendy, and she gets given this mysterious box, and it has various buttons that do different things. I think one of the buttons is like really dangerous. She's not ever supposed to press it. I remember liking it until the ending, which I thought was a little bit lackluster. I don't know if it was supposed to be a trilogy from the beginning, but there have since been a second and third book. I think at some point I would like to read this trilogy. I really love Stephen King. I do have lofty goals of one day having read all of Stephen King's works, but it's definitely not a high priority. Next, I have the Ember and the Ashes Quartet by Sabaa Tahir. Now, I read An Ember in the Ashes, I want to say in 2020 or 2021, and I loved this. This was a 5-star book for me. I thought it was phenomenal, and I carried on to book 2, and book 2 felt like a huge step down for me. I did not enjoy it as much as the first one. It has a trope that I really hate in it. Just overall, I was really disappointed with the second book, and I didn't carry on. I wanted to, I meant to, I think I was so put off by this that I couldn't bring myself to read that third book right away, and then it just never happened. So this is a quartet that I do want to finish one day. It's still on my TBR, but I know at this point I would have to go back and reread both of these in order to carry on. So that's always a struggle for me, because rereading something because you have to, that feels like homework. So yeah, but I did love this one so much, and I remember really liking the characters, so like I do want to know how the story ends. I hope that books 3 and 4 are better. So yeah, I do want to finish it. I don't know when, but I do someday want to finish it. Next, I have the Elements of Cadence duology. First book being A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I read this first book. I genuinely really loved it. I picked it up though because I thought it was a standalone. Part of the reason why I like to binge series is because my memory is terrible. And so if I let enough time pass between books, I will just forget like everything. I forget characters' names, I forget plot threads. I think these 2 books came out in the same year, but I read it right when it came out, and then the sequel didn't come out until like December, and by then I had forgotten stuff. And so now it's a situation of needing to reread in order to finish, which can be a struggle. I did love this. One day I'm sure I will be in the mood to reread it and finish the duology. Next, I have The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I was so close to finishing this. I read the first 3 books. I enjoyed them very much. They're fun, fast-paced, popcorn YA books. I read these first 3 as well as the novella, and I read some of the short stories. I was really deep in this series. I don't really know what happened. I think part of it was that was around the time that I joined BookTube, and I was really self-conscious about the fact that I was a binge reader, and I was concerned that being a binge reader was going to make my wrap-ups really boring, because it would be like, oh, well, I read a whole trilogy this month, and that's all I read, and so my wrap-up is just me talking about a series I read or something. And so I was like, okay, I need to spread out my books a little bit more, which backfired big time because then I didn't finish the series. Yeah, at this point, it's been way too long. I barely remember anything, so I would have to go back and reread it all. And hopefully one day I will feel like doing that. This one especially kills me because I was so close. Like just, I had one more book. A really chunky book, but only one more. Just didn't quite get there. All right, next I have one that I had completely forgotten about. It's Benti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a trilogy of novellas about a main character who can use math magic, and she goes on this spaceship, I think to go to university. This alien race boards the ship she's on and kills all these students, and she's the only one left surviving, and she has to make peace with these aliens and figure out what they want and try not to get killed. I thought it was interesting, and I was definitely into it until the ending. I felt like it ended kind of unsatisfyingly. So the aliens have a reason for boarding the spaceship and killing everyone, and the novella ends on a note where it felt like the aliens were justified in doing that, and I didn't really agree with that sentiment. I believe I gave it 3 stars. I think I may have tried getting into the second novella and just not being able to get into it, or just setting it down for one reason or another. This one, honestly, I would be tempted to DNF. I don't feel a lot of pull or inspiration to finish this. You guys could change my mind about this, but I don't know a lot of people who have read this trilogy and like loved it, you know? I don't know that this is like a favorite series, but I don't know. Like I said, you guys could totally change my mind on this. Let me know if you think I should finish this trilogy. But yeah, currently I'm leaning towards not. Okay, next I have the Memoirs of Lady Trent. I read this book several years ago. I listened to it on audio, and I remember really enjoying it. I believe I gave it 4 stars. And I think what happened is that I discovered that the physical editions have illustrations. And I felt like I had been cheated by listening to the audiobook, because I love illustrations. I love when books have illustrations. So that was number 1. And then I think number 2, I may just not have had access to book number 2 at that time. I don't know. I can't remember exactly why I didn't continue on with this. Like I said, I did enjoy it. I would love to read this series at some point. It's about the memoirs of Lady Trent. She's a dragon naturalist, and she goes out into the wild and studies dragons, and it's told from the point of view of her as like an old woman, and so she's recounting her life, and it's very interesting, and she's a really likable, endearing character. So yeah, I would love to go back to these one day. Okay, and then the last series I have for you is The Lord of the Rings. I have read the first one. I have read The Hobbit. I haven't finished the trilogy. I feel like I've talked about this a bunch, but if you're new, I love the movies. The Lord of the Rings movies are my favorite movies of all time. I've seen them a bajillion times. I can practically quote them verbatim. Reading this was a bit of a mixed experience. I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD, and there's just something about Tolkien's writing that does and doesn't work for me. Like, I do think his writing is beautiful, and there are passages that I find breathtakingly beautiful. But, you know, there are also tangents that he goes on that I find really difficult to pay attention to. I feel like the narrative isn't grounded in a way that like more modern novels are. So that's also a bit of a struggle for me. I think I learned my lesson. I'm just gonna pick up the next books whenever I'm ready to. I'm not gonna put that pressure on myself to push through or make myself read them, because I know that that's just going to backfire. One day I'll feel ready. One day I will have completed this trilogy, and until then, in my heart, I know that this is a story that I do love, and it's just not that big of a deal. I'm not gonna feel guilty about it anymore. That's where I am with that. Alright, so those are all of my unfinished series. I have 1 definite DNF and 1 possible DNF. That brings me down to 9 open series. That still feels too high for me personally, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. Like, I know that's a number I could tackle, and I know that most of these series are series that I will hopefully enjoy, hence why I'm keeping them on my TBR. Please let me know, what series are you in the middle of? Do you have any particularly embarrassing ones? I think I have several embarrassing ones on my list. Let me know what yours are. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. I hope to see you next time. Bye!